Stealing from the Dawn, written and narrated by Moonbeam Audiobook. If you are new here, please consider subscribing. Chapter 1, Selena. The air in the ventilation shaft tasted like dust and ozone, a welcome change from the chilled, sterile atmosphere of Roman Costello's 45th floor. Selena moved with the fluid, noiseless grace that had earned her the moniker. The Ghost. There were no hurried breaths, no scraping of fabric against metal, just the quiet, rhythmic efficiency of a predator closing in on its prey. Tonight's prey was the Tears of Aethelred, a legendary, impossibly flawless blue diamond. It wasn't the value that mattered, it was the leverage. A week ago, a familiar, greasy voice from her past, a man who held the key to her quiet life, had shown her a photo of her estranged sister, along with a simple, chilling demand. Bring him the diamond or watch her world burn. Selena worked alone, trusted no one, and absolutely hated being forced. But family was the one lock she couldn't pick. This was her last job, her final forced performance, and then she would dissolve back into the silence she craved. The clock in her mind was a silent, internal metronome. She had 28 minutes remaining until the exterior environmental sensors reset, creating a 3-second window she needed to be back in the wind. She reached the end of the shaft, directly above the penthouse's private art gallery, the antechamber to the vault. Roman Costello's security wasn't just good. It was a museum-grade labyrinth built with the paranoia of a man who owned entire cities. Every layer was a calculated insult to her skill. The floor was pressure-sensitive, the air was monitored for changes in density, and the walls were equipped with active micro-frequency scanners that would detect even a pinprick of thermal difference. Selena slid her custom-made composite fiber tool into the access panel lock, her heartbeat steady. She wasn't trying to beat the system. She was teaching it a better way to breathe. A series of rapid, nearly inaudible clicks followed, each one a tiny victory. The magnetic lock disengaged, and she slipped out of the shaft like smoke, landing lightly on the polished, dark granite floor. The gallery was breathtakingly quiet, a mausoleum of wealth. Spotlights illuminated masterpieces. A genuine Klimt shimmered in a corner. A Rothko commanded an entire wall, and priceless Hellenic sculptures stood silent guard. Roman Costello didn't just buy art. He curated it with the meticulous, possessive love of a man who saw beauty in control. She moved swiftly towards the far wall, where she knew the vault was concealed. The air was heavy with the scent of old money and new steel. She bypassed a set of seismic sensors concealed beneath a priceless Persian rug, a classic misdirection, but effective enough to catch a lesser thief. The vault door was a solid wall of brushed titanium, unmarked and seamless. This was the final challenge. She knelt, retrieving a slender, specialized fiber cable and a miniature console from her kit. This wasn't about explosives or brute force. It was a conversation with a mainframe. "Hello, handsome," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of the cooling systems. She linked into the external access point, using a dynamic encryption key she'd spent 6 months building and perfecting. The key was useless unless she was physically present, running through the external routing loop of the building's power grid. The screen on her console flickered to life, showing a clean, simple interface, a stark contrast to the expected digital mess. Roman was arrogant enough to believe his system was impenetrable. "Let's see if arrogance runs in the family," she thought, a faint, professional smile touching her lips. The next 10 minutes were a blur of intense focus. It wasn't just hacking, it was a digital negotiation. She used a randomized permutation of prime numbers to bypass the initial 2-factor authentication, then injected a tiny, self-destructing kernel of code that mimicked a system maintenance update. The titanium door slid open with a whisper of escaping, chilled air. Inside, the vault was smaller than expected, but dazzling. The light, generated by concealed UV-free emitters, was focused entirely on a single, velvet-lined pedestal in the center of the room. And resting on that pedestal, radiating a cold, celestial blue light that seemed to absorb all sound, was the Tears of Aethelred. It was magnificent. It looked less like a cut gemstone and more like a shard of crystallized moonlight. Selena approached the pedestal. This final layer of security was passive. Simple laser grids cross-hatching the space around the diamond, connected to a sound alarm only a dog could hear. Standard protocol for a museum, but a final, predictable hurdle for a man who believed in the power of spectacle. She produced a small silver capsule of liquid nitrogen and applied a precise, micro-sized jet to the points where the laser grids converged, creating tiny, opaque distortions in the light paths. She slipped her hand through the momentary gaps, her movements practiced and perfect. Her fingertips brushed the cool, smooth velvet of the pedestal. She had done it. Freedom was a handspan away. The familiar surge of triumph, the exquisite high of proving herself against the best, washed over her. This was the only addiction she allowed herself. Her fingers closed around the diamond. It was cold, heavy, and utterly silent. Mission complete. She started to withdraw, already mentally calculating the fastest route back to the vents, when the cold silence of the vault was violently shattered. A subtle, nearly inaudible click. And then the light in the vault flared, blindingly bright, and the seamless titanium door slammed shut behind her with a definitive mechanical thud that echoed the sound of a closing trap. The laser grids went dark. The room was no longer just illuminated, it was exposed. Selena froze, her hand still holding the diamond, her body instantly coiled and ready to strike. Her heart, which had been perfectly regulated moments before, now hammered a furious rhythm against her ribs. She was not alone. In the corner of the vault, perfectly integrated into the wall structure, was an unexpected detail. A sleek, black leather armchair. And sitting in that armchair, perfectly at ease as if waiting for a late dinner guest, was Roman Costello. He was a masterpiece of masculine elegance, draped in a charcoal suit that was clearly bespoke, the kind of tailoring that suggested lethal efficiency beneath the fabric. He wasn't big or bulky, but he radiated an intimidating, coiled power, the kind of stillness that precedes a hurricane. His dark hair was meticulously styled, his eyes, dark, intelligent, and unsettlingly amused, were fixed entirely on her. He held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in one hand, the ice cubes making the only sound in the suffocating silence. He raised the glass slowly, his gaze running over her leather suit, the subtle gear strapped to her thigh, and finally, settling on the diamond clutched in her hand. "The ghost, I presume," Roman said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that was both perfectly cultivated and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the voice of a man accustomed to giving orders and receiving immediate, absolute obedience. "I confess I expected you to be a myth. Or at least, less captivating." Selena didn't flinch, though a slow-burning fury was starting to ignite in her belly. He had known. He hadn't just secured the vault. He had turned it into a waiting room. Every alarm she bypassed, every system she defeated, had been a performance for him. "Costello," she returned, her voice steady and edged with ice. "I'd offer a handshake, but my hands are full. Or perhaps you'd prefer I drop your shiny trinket." She shifted her weight, deliberately creating tension in the room. If she threw the diamond, it would be a distraction, giving her half a second to move. He merely smiled, a slow, predatory curve of his lips that was far more dangerous than any snarl. "Ah, the bluff. Always predictable, even from a legend," he commented, taking a slow sip of his drink. "You won't drop it. You risked too much to get it. And more importantly, you need it for the person who forced you here. You're not working this job for the thrill, are you, Selena? You're working it for leverage, and now I'm afraid that leverage belongs to me. The use of her real name, a name she rarely used, a name she had ensured was scrubbed from all official records, was a cold shock. He didn't just know she was coming. He knew who she was, and, more terrifyingly, why. You've done your homework, Selena acknowledged, forcing her breathing back to its professional rhythm. She wasn't beaten yet. She was merely adapting to a new battlefield. Thoroughly, Roman confirmed, crossing one leg over the other, the movement casual yet commanding. I found your blackmailer's safe house about 3 hours ago. Quite messy, I must say. He won't be bothering you or your sister again. Selena's breath hitched, a tiny, involuntary gasp of pure relief and stunned realization. He had removed her constraint. He hadn't saved her. He had simply replaced her master. You eliminated the reason for the theft, she stated flatly, the cold weight of the diamond in her palm suddenly feeling like a worthless stone. Precisely. Now, the Tears of Aethelred is a secondary consideration. It's simply bait, Roman said, finally setting his glass down on a small, concealed side table. The silence returned, heavy and expectant. His full attention was now hers, and it felt like a spotlight on her soul. And what is the primary consideration? Selena asked, her tone challenging. Roman rose to his feet. He wasn't towering, but he had the imposing presence of a man who never had to raise his voice. He took 3 slow, deliberate steps toward her. The space in the vault was already small, and his approach felt like a physical invasion. The primary consideration, my ghost, is you, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that sent a shiver of awareness, sharp and unwelcome, down her spine. I have always appreciated acquiring things that are rare, dangerous, and utterly unique. I already own the diamond. Now I want the thief. And since I've just neutralized your only motivation for wanting to leave, I'm going to make you a better offer. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough for her to smell the subtle, expensive scent of his cologne. A mix of sandalwood and something distinctly metallic, like cold, polished steel. You are a creature of freedom. I know this. You trust no one. I respect this. But I have 1,000 enemies, secrets that need retrieving, and problems that can only be solved by someone who moves like smoke and cuts like a knife. My security is clearly flawless. He gestured around the locked vault with an air of self-congratulation. But my reach in the shadows needs a touch of artistry. He extended a hand toward her, not in surrender or threat, but in invitation. I won't offer you money, Selena. You can take that diamond and sell it for a life of luxury. But it will be a life of perpetual looking over your shoulder, forever hiding. I will offer you something better. Challenge, protection, and the chance to finally use your exceptional skills for a purpose that matters. You will be my personal thief, my weapon in the dark, my most prized possession. And in exchange, I offer you the only freedom that matters in this life, the freedom from fear. He let the silence hang, allowing the weight of his proposition and the undeniable magnetic current now snapping between them to fill the room. The air was thick with unvoiced questions, danger, and a teasing, dizzying tension. Selena stared into his dark eyes, searching for the lie, the weakness, the trapdoor she could exploit. There was none. Only cold, hard truth and a frightening awareness of the exhilarating game he was offering. He was offering her a new cage, yes, but one built of glass and steel, where she could still see the sun, still move, still play. She took one last, desperate breath of the controlled vault air, the diamond heavy in her hand. The thrill of the heist was over. The game had just begun. And if I refuse your generous offer, Don Costello? She asked, her voice dangerously low. He simply smiled, a flash of teeth in the controlled light, the answer unspoken but perfectly clear. Refuse and you don't walk out of this vault alive. You won't, Roman stated, his conviction absolute, his gaze holding hers captive. Because a ghost doesn't turn down a challenge this good. And you, Selena, are nothing if not a challenge.
Chapter 2. Roman. The moment her fingers closed around the diamond, I felt a private, profoundly satisfying click in my own chest. The sound of the lock snapping shut, the ultimate trap closing around its quarry. I didn't care about the Tears of Aethelred. It was pretty, yes, and exquisitely rare. But it was just a rock. I had a dozen rocks like it in the bank vault downtown. The real prize was the creature who had managed to stand precisely where she was now. Selena. She was fury and ice, draped in black leather that seemed to be custom-made from shadow itself. The rage shimmering in her dark eyes wasn't directed at the security systems she'd beaten, but at the man who had outsmarted her. That fire, that unadulterated contempt for being outmaneuvered, was the most fascinating thing I had acquired in years. I watched her coiled tension, the almost imperceptible tremor in her arm as she fought the instinctive urge to launch herself at me. She was utterly magnificent. The entire penthouse, the gallery, the vault, the 3 miles of fiber-optic cable she'd tamed, it had all been a stage for her performance. The ghost didn't steal for money. She stole for the purity of the challenge. That was the first lesson I'd learned about her during the 6 weeks I'd spent tracking her digital wake. I had left the diamond unprotected for 1 layer too long, a perfectly calculated vulnerability that only a thief of her caliber would notice and trust. The lock that sealed the vault was a manual override controlled by a button concealed beneath the rim of my armchair. "Welcome to my collection, Ghost." "You eliminated the reason for the theft," she'd stated flatly. Her composure, even in total defeat, was astounding. Most men, most killers I trapped would be sweating, begging, or spitting threats. She was just analyzing the transaction. "A necessary administrative cleanup," I corrected, straightening my suit jacket with a minute adjustment of my cuffs. The truth was, her low-life blackmailer, a mid-level scum named Vicenza, was an annoyance. But the deeper truth was that I couldn't tolerate the idea of her serving anyone else. Her loyalty, even if forced, had to be tethered exclusively to me. It wasn't about ownership yet. It was about elimination of rivals. That, I understood, was the first step toward genuine mutual respect in my world. I walked closer, watching her eyes track every millisecond of my movement. Her muscles tightened, ready to launch. She didn't look like a woman contemplating surrender. She looked like a leopard calculating the angle of attack through a keyhole. I confess, the moment I saw the footage of you bypassing the retinal scanner by projecting a synthetic image onto the lens of your own eyeball, pure digital audacity, by the way, I knew money would be an insult. I continued, a smile playing on my lips. It wasn't a kind smile, but a hungry one. "It usually pays the bills," she retorted, the diamond still clutched like a weapon. "Or are you planning on paying me in philosophical fulfillment, Don Costello?" "I'm planning on paying you in thrill," I said, emphasizing the word. "You are addicted to the edge, Selena. You crave the impossible lock, the 3-second window. I will give you a lifetime supply of impossible locks. You will be operating at a level of complexity and danger that no freelance job could ever offer. You won't just be stealing diamonds. You'll be stealing secrets, destroying reputations, and subtly rearranging the power dynamic of this city. You will be operating in my name, and therefore untouchable." I moved into her personal space, closer than any rational man would go with a cornered predator. The metallic scent of her gear and the subtle, sharp perfume of her adrenaline were intoxicating. I wanted to see if I could make her break eye contact. She didn't. Her dark gaze held mine, challenging, volatile. And what do you get out of this arrangement, besides an expensive pet who hates you? She whispered, the proximity raising the sexual tension until the air between us felt charged, ready to spark. I reached out, but not for her. My fingers brushed the cold, faceted surface of the Tears of Aethelred still in her grasp. The contact was brief, impersonal, yet intensely intimate. Possession is the truest form of flattery, mia phantasma, I murmured, leaning in just enough so that she had to tilt her head back slightly to hold my gaze. I collect things. I collect art that defies time, wine that defies aging, and people who defy expectations. You are all three. I acquire what I desire, and what I desire most is your absolute willing cooperation. Willing. That was the key. I didn't want a slave. I wanted a partner who hated me but needed me. That kind of tension was far more sustainable and far more interesting. Willing cooperation after you trapped me, eliminated my backup, and told me that refusal equals death. That's not a choice, Roman. That's a highly structured kidnapping. I chuckled, a rich, genuine sound that surprised both of us. Ah, there's the humor. I knew you had it. And that, Carissima, is the difference between a high-stakes business proposal and a messy abduction. If I wanted to just kidnap you, you would have woken up tied to a chair in a cellar an hour ago. This is an invitation to play chess against the devil, with the understanding that the devil always wins the game, but the queen gets to keep her crown. I took a step back, breaking the dangerous physical connection, but leaving the psychological and sexual tension humming between us. The vault has served its purpose, I announced, moving toward the titanium door. We need to discuss terms and logistics, and I prefer doing that in an environment that serves good wine. You may keep the diamond for now. Consider it a down payment, or perhaps a very expensive paperweight. I placed my hand on the biometric scanner beside the door. It glowed green instantly, and the massive door groaned open. Selena remained rooted to her spot, still processing the sheer audacity of my control. "You're telling me," she said, her voice incredulous, "that you've set me free inside your own fortress, with $1 billion diamond in my hand?" I paused in the doorway, looking back at her over my shoulder. The light caught the sharp, aristocratic line of my jaw, the hint of danger in my profile. "I'm telling you, Selena, that you are the most valuable thing in my house now. Every lock on this floor is designed to keep the world out, but the final, most important lock, the one to your loyalty, can only be opened from the inside. Try to run. Try to outsmart me. If you succeed, congratulations. You've earned your freedom and my respect. But I assure you, you won't get past the 5th floor without setting off a sequence of events that will make your former blackmailer look like a Boy Scout." I stepped out of the vault and into the cool, dark elegance of the gallery. "Come, Ghost. The game has just reached the endgame, and I believe it's my move." She hesitated only for a heartbeat, long enough to confirm the diamond was still cold in her palm, and that her only options were indeed fight or flight, and that the best way to fight was to stay close. She moved, quick and silent, passing through the massive doorway I held open. As she moved past me, the brief friction of her leather-clad shoulder against my silk-lined jacket ignited a shock wave of heat that felt less like chemistry and more like explosive ordnance. I closed the vault door behind us. The Tears of Aethelred was forgotten. The penthouse was vast, minimalist, and breathtakingly high, overlooking the glittering, conquered cityscape. It was the perfect habitat for a predator like me. First rule of business, I began, leading her past the Klimt into a spacious living area dominated by floor-to-ceiling glass. I am Roman, not Don Costello, unless we are in the presence of my associates. Second rule, I don't believe in shackles. I believe in consequences. Try to escape, and the consequences will be immediate, thorough, and far-reaching. I will not hurt you, but I will make your life a mathematical impossibility. She stopped by a massive window, looking down at the city lights. I could see her reflection in the glass, a warrior framed by my domain. "You sound like a man who expects to be kept amused," she finally said, turning to face me, her posture defiant. "Amusement is the highest form of professional respect," I agreed, walking toward the marble bar. "Whiskey? You look like you need a drink after that marathon session in the ventilation." I was impressed by the route you took, by the way. Most would have gone through the service elevator shaft. Too easy, too detectable. "I don't drink on the job," she clipped out. "You are no longer on the job, Selena. You are the job. This is your life now." I poured myself another finger of aged Macallan and offered her a bottle of chilled San Pellegrino, a small, subtle gesture of care amidst the power struggle. She took the bottle. Her fingers brushed mine, and the brief contact felt like a spark across a bare wire. She stared at me, the confusion battling the calculated anger in her eyes. "You really think you can control me?" she challenged, twisting the cap off the water with unnecessary force. "I don't think I can control you." "I know I can engage you," I countered smoothly. "You operate on logic. You have a supreme disdain for incompetence. I am never incompetent. I offer you an infinitely better, more challenging existence than the one you were heading toward. You wanted to dissolve into the silence? I will make your silence resonate throughout the city." I leaned one elbow on the bar, watching her drink. Her throat worked visibly, a tiny human detail that contrasted beautifully with the impenetrable facade of the ghost. "Let's talk logistics," I continued, shifting gears abruptly. The blackmailer, Vicenza, had an associate, a lawyer in the city council with loose lips and a crippling gambling debt. We start there. I need every ounce of sensitive data he holds about Luciano's expansion into the shipping sector. Financial, personnel, everything. I want it yesterday. "A lawyer? That's hardly a challenge. I deal with military-grade servers and biometric scans," she scoffed, a flicker of genuine boredom crossing her features. "The challenge isn't the theft, Selena. The challenge is making it look like it was done by Luciano's own people without a trace of your involvement. It's the artistry of the misdirection. The data isn't just stolen. It's planted, modified, and made to look like an inside job. It's psychological warfare, not a simple B&E. You'll be working in the light, manipulating the shadows, with me running the clock and the contingencies." I pushed a sleek, matte black tablet across the marble. It contained the initial briefing file, encrypted with a bespoke algorithm that would self-destruct if she tried to copy or transfer the data. "You have until dawn to memorize every detail of this man's life, his routines, his vices, his fears. After that, we plan the infiltration. Welcome to the Costello operation, Ghost. Your next job is to steal more than just a diamond. It's to steal a future for me, and perhaps for you." I watched her hesitate for a long moment, the diamond a meaningless lump in her lap. the tablet glowing with the promise of high-stakes danger in front of her. The fury was still there, but now it was mixed with the undeniable spark of professional interest, the addictive promise of an impossible task. She finally met my gaze, a flicker of wicked humor in her eyes. "If I'm your most prized possession, Roman, you should know that prized possessions need proper care. I want a new wardrobe. This leather is getting stiff." A slow, satisfied grin spread across my face. She was negotiating. She was engaged. "Consider it done. I'll have my personal tailor here at 7. You'll need something less distracting," I said, letting my gaze drop to the curve of her body beneath the tight suit. The teasing was necessary, a reminder of the very real, very charged dynamic between us. "I won't make any promises," she warned, picking up the tablet. "I wouldn't want you to. Promises are fragile, Selena. I prefer the unbreakable contract of shared danger." I walked away from the bar and toward the master suite, leaving her alone in the vast space with the challenge, the diamond, and the unsettling realization that the biggest risk wasn't the theft, it was the man who caught the thief. The ghost is mine. Now the real game begins.
Chapter 3. Selena. The diamond in my hand felt suddenly meaningless, a cold lump of compressed carbon that had cost me my freedom, yet ironically secured my safety. Roman's parting comment about the stiff leather and the need for a less distracting wardrobe was a perfectly placed barb. It wasn't just a physical assessment. It was a psychological probe, reminding me that even my professional camouflage was now transparent to him, and that the attraction sizzling between us was a weapon he intended to wield. "I won't make any promises. I prefer the unbreakable contract of shared danger." His words echoed as I stared at the matte black tablet he'd abandoned on the white marble bar. He didn't lock her up. He gave her homework. He didn't threaten her. He gave her a challenge. He had dismantled her need for the diamond, addressed her worst fear, her sister, and then immediately hooked her addiction, the impossible problem. He was infuriatingly good. I set the Tears of Aethelred down next to the tablet. It looked tacky against the expanse of the Costello penthouse. The raw, desperate luxury of the rock felt out of place compared to the calculated, intimidating elegance of the man and his home. This wasn't a fortress built for flashy displays. It was an apex predator's lair, designed for observation and control. I ran a quick professional scan of the main living area, using a tiny retinal scanner-safe device concealed in a false button on my jacket. The result was immediate and chilling. Nothing. No visible cameras, no obvious microphones, no pressure plates. But the air was still monitored, I knew it. The technology was woven into the structure itself, using passive induction coils and minute changes in airflow. I wasn't just in a smart home. I was in a living, breathing surveillance system. My life of shadows was about to be lived under a constant, unwavering spotlight. My adrenaline was spiking, but not with fear, with the exhilaration of having found a worthy adversary. "Fine, Roman," I muttered to the empty air, picking up the tablet. "If you want a game, I'll give you a game." I sat down on one of the ridiculously oversized plush sofas. The leather suit felt rough and restrictive against the silk cushioning. I powered on the tablet, inputting the biometric signature of my thumbprint, which he had undoubtedly captured and authorized for access, and opened the file on the lawyer, Counselor Thomas Valerius. Roman hadn't lied. The file was meticulous. Valerius, age 52, divorced, 2 college-age kids, crippling debt from a hidden investment in a failed tech startup, a mistress in a neighboring district, and a deep-seated inferiority complex regarding his rival, Luciano. The man was a walking, ticking vulnerability. The data Luciano's organization was feeding Valerius was encrypted, but the key was in the file. Valerius's late wife's birthday, subtly combined with the last 4 digits of his secret offshore account. A pathetic attempt at security layered over sentimental arrogance. I felt a genuine, professional surge of respect for Roman. He hadn't tasked me with breaking into a bank. He had tasked me with breaking a man. This wasn't brute force. It was manipulation, artistry, and psychological cruelty. It was, in its own twisted way, a far more challenging and satisfying theft. This is still a cage, Selena. Don't forget that. I stood up and paced, still working off the furious energy of my capture. I couldn't just accept this. I needed to know the full extent of his control. I walked toward the master suite Roman had retreated into. A glass door, seamless, guarded by nothing more than a simple, elegant handle. No lock. The true control was systemic, not physical. I knocked once, sharply, ignoring the internal voice that told me this was a terrible idea. "Come in, ghost." "I was expecting you," Roman's voice called back instantly, calm and assured. I pushed the door open. The suite was immense, a study in masculine power. It held a dark wood desk scattered with digital screens showing financial algorithms and a 4-poster bed that looked like it was designed for a king. Roman was standing by the window, shedding his suit jacket. He was wearing a fitted white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms, his wrist gleaming with a heavy, classic gold watch. He looked less like a crime boss and more like a CEO ready to crush the global market. "I have questions that the briefing file didn't cover," I stated, keeping my voice purely professional, ignoring the sudden, tight pull in my stomach at the sight of him. He turned, leaning back against the window frame, arms crossed, his gaze heavy and possessive. "Ask them." "My sister," I demanded, stepping further into the room. "You said Vicenza won't bother her." "That's not assurance. I need proof of her safety, and a guarantee that she remains untouched. Forever." Roman sighed, a sound of weary patience. "That sounds like you don't trust me, Selena." "Trust is a luxury afforded to the dead in my line of work," I snapped. "You blackmailed me with a diamond, then caught me with a lie and murdered my blackmailer. Forgive me if I haven't sent you a thank you note and a fruit basket yet. I need absolute confirmation." His eyes narrowed slightly, but the amusement didn't entirely leave them. "Very well. Your sister is in a private facility in Geneva, under the best medical care money can buy, completely unaware of your recent career choices. She is protected by a team who answers only to me. If I am harmed, if I am compromised, or if you attempt to betray me, the protection ceases, and her location becomes public. That is your guarantee. She is safe only as long as you are mine." The bluntness of the threat was a cold slap. It was the only leverage that mattered, and he used it without a shred of remorse. "And what if I decide to take the diamond and disappear tonight anyway?" "You claim to be untouchable." Test that theory. I gripped the pendant I wore around my neck. A cheap piece of pewter that concealed a micro-injector of non-lethal, untraceable toxin. Roman pushed off the window and walked toward me. Slowly, deliberately. This time, he didn't stop until he was only inches away, invading my airspace until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I held my ground, my posture rigid, but the proximity was doing dangerous things to my focus. He reached out, not to touch me, but to gently push the thin silver chain of the pewter pendant back under the collar of my suit. The slight pressure of his finger against my neck was electrifying. "Selena, you are the ghost. You disappear. That is your art. But where would you go? Every government agency in the world wants you. Every rival syndicate wants your skills. You'd spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, hiding in dingy apartments, stealing petty cash to survive, never using that brilliant mind on anything but logistics. You'd die of boredom within a year. And I would hunt you. Not to punish you, but to retrieve my most interesting piece of art. And I assure you my retrieval methods are far less pleasant than my welcoming party. His eyes, dark as midnight, held a dangerous spark that was both terrifying and utterly captivating. He was challenging my very nature, daring me to prove he was right about my addiction to the challenge. "You're telling me my freedom is slavery, and your gilded cage is liberation?" I scoffed, trying to inject some distance into the conversation. But my voice came out breathy and tight. "I'm telling you that in my world, you only have freedom when you are powerful enough to take it. And I am offering you an instant shortcut to power. Look at the data on that tablet, Selena. Valerius is a sniveling coward. Luciano is a predictable brute. They are amateurs playing a children's game. You and I, we play at the level of gods. You can't tell me that doesn't appeal to the heart of the ghost." He was so close that his scent, sandalwood and steel, was overwhelming. The air felt thick, heavy with the unspoken admission that this partnership was built on mutual professional respect, layered with fierce, unbridled sexual tension. "And the price of playing with a god," I whispered, the words betraying a vulnerability I hated. "The price is honesty, competence, and accepting that you are no longer alone," Roman murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. "And perhaps occasional compliance with a stiff wardrobe. I expect my partners to look the part." "I'll wear the dress," I bit out, the concession bitter on my tongue. "But if you think I will ever for a second stop looking for the nearest exit, you are severely underestimating me." A genuine smile, slow and devastating, returned to his face. "I wouldn't dream of it. The day you stop plotting your escape is the day you cease to be interesting. Now I have 1,000 enemies to disappoint. Read the Valerius file. We meet in the communications center at 0700. Don't be late." He pulled back, restoring a critical distance that allowed me to breathe again. I spun around, retreating from the room before I did something monumentally stupid, like reaching out and closing the distance he'd just opened. I stalked back to the living area. The diamond was still on the bar, but the tablet was now the only thing that mattered. I picked up the Tears of Aethelred, walked over to the immense, glass-walled wine cellar, a section that was accessible and utterly stunning, and placed the diamond on the shelf next to a bottle of 1961 Haut Briand. It was the perfect hiding spot. Valuable things were invisible when surrounded by even more valuable things. It was no longer leverage, it was a promise. Turning my focus back to the tablet, I felt the familiar, cold clarity of the ghost settle over me. The deal was struck. I was an agent, a weapon, a prized possession. But Roman had made a critical mistake. He had given me a role, a purpose, and access to his world. A ghost doesn't just steal objects. A ghost steals information, weaknesses, and eventually, the keys to the entire house. I settled onto the sofa, my legs curled beneath me, the tablet blazing with the details of Thomas Valerius. The lawyer was the start. The small lock Roman thought would prove my value. But Valerius had connections, and connections had vulnerabilities. 0700 Roman, I'll be there, and I'll be ready to steal your city right out from under your tailored suit.
Chapter 4. Roman. The problem with acquiring a creature as perfectly crafted and volatile as Selena was the maintenance. Most assets were predictable. Give them money, give them power, and they stayed in their designated positions. Selena, however, ran on a different fuel. Friction. She needed a worthy counterpoint, a puzzle she couldn't solve with ease, and a challenge big enough to distract her from the obvious, constant temptation of my jugular. I hadn't slept. Not out of nervousness, but out of sheer intellectual exhilaration. The ghost was under my roof. I spent the remaining hours until 700 in my study, reviewing security footage, not of the perimeter, but of the living area. I watched her via the low-light optical sensors subtly woven into the ceiling beams. She didn't stay on the plush sofa for long. She prowled. She paced the massive expanse of the floor-to-ceiling glass, her profile stark and beautiful against the pre-dawn glow of the city. She stopped by the wine cellar, the spot where I knew she'd left the diamond, and gave the bottle of Haute Brion a long, considering look. Not an emotional creature, but one who appreciates value, I noted. Good. Then she spent 3 solid hours crouched on the marble floor by the bar, the black tablet resting on the polished stone like a holy text. She wasn't just reading the Valerius file, she was dismantling it. I could see the rapid, almost unnerving flicker of her eyes as she absorbed every piece of data. The wife's birthday, the offshore account digits, the precise coordinates of the mistress's apartment in the West End. She was processing human weakness, translating it into architectural flaws. At 6:58, she was gone from the frame. I didn't need the surveillance feed to tell me where she was going. She was getting ready. I knew her pride wouldn't allow her to be late or, God forbid, look anything less than razor sharp. The meeting was set in the command center, a secure room 2 floors below the penthouse, accessible only by a private coded lift that required 3 separate biometric clearances. It was a space of clean lines and tactical precision, featuring a wall-sized digital display capable of mirroring any network in the world. It was where I conducted my empire's delicate, destructive business. I was already there at 6:55, waiting for the ting of the elevator. I wore a suit the color of polished steel, projecting the authority she needed to hate, but also the control she needed to respect. At 6:59, the elevator doors slid open. Selena walked out, and the air immediately thickened, charged with the pure magnetic force of her presence. She was no longer wearing the restrictive leather suit. The tailor hadn't had time yet. But her travel gear. She'd found an abandoned black turtleneck and tactical pants in one of the guest quarters and had cinched her waist with a broad leather belt. She looked less like a cat burglar and more like a warrior, stripped down for combat. And the diamond was gone from her person. She was all business. "Good morning, Roman," she said, her voice smooth, utterly devoid of the morning grogginess that plagues mere mortals. "Selena, punctuality suits you, and the absence of the diamond tells me you've made your choice," I observed, my gaze sweeping over her. I saw a small smudge of dust near her left ear. She must have gone back into the vent system, checking for alternate routes, testing my claim of omnipresence. I approved of the tenacity. "The choice was self-preservation, nothing more sentimental," she corrected, walking past me toward the command station. She ran a practiced hand over the cold glass of the main screen. "Valerius is weak, sentimental, and predictable. Luciano uses him for low-level financial routing through the council. It's all about the shipping contract kickbacks. If we hit the server where Valerius keeps his real files, Luciano will only see a low-level data breach." "Precisely. We don't want a war. We want a perfectly crafted lie that turns Luciano inward," I said, stepping up beside her. "Valerius keeps his work files in a secure server room on the 20th floor of the Metropolitan Building. Standard access card, biometric handprint, and 2 guards. I pulled up the floor plans on the main screen, my arm brushing hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a sharp, distracting heat up my side. I felt her tense, not pulling away, but tightening her core. She was aware. She was fighting it. Good. "Standard access is too easy," she scoffed, dismissing the map with a flick of her hand. "It's sloppy. Valerius is a creature of habit. The handprint is a problem, but it's solvable with thermal transfer gel. Standard kit. The guards are the real issue. Two men, likely bored, distracted, and easily bypassed. I'm not interested in bypassing them, Ghost. I'm interested in framing them, I corrected, leaning closer. The intellectual sparring was a form of foreplay between us, a dazzling verbal dance that pushed all my buttons. The narrative is that Valerius is compromised because his security detail is corrupt. Luciano trusts his security detail more than he trusts a lawyer with a gambling addiction. We need the guards to be the focal point of the blame. She turned fully toward me, her eyes alight with professional intrigue. Board guards. Distracted. We introduce a momentary, irresistible diversion, plant a high-value item, something they can't explain purchasing, in one of their lockers, and then we make the breach look like they opened the door for payment. I was thinking of a much cleaner, more elegant approach, I countered, my voice dropping, a predatory thrill in my tone. A ghost doesn't bribe. A ghost uses the environment. The server room has its own climate control system, separate from the main building. Valerius is a hypochondriac. He keeps it set to a precise 68 degrees. No more, no less. She waited, her focus absolute. We don't steal the data from the server. We compromise the environmental controls first. We make the room drop to a controlled, precise 40 degrees for exactly 90 seconds. The guards will complain, check the system, and call maintenance. That's your window. The biometric scanner fails below a certain internal temperature. That failure is your door. We leave a digitally signed maintenance log confirming the temporary failure. Luciano blames the building's incompetent staff, and more importantly, Valerius for his over-engineered climate control. Selena stared at me for a long, silent moment, the respect in her eyes battling her intense dislike for me. It was a beautiful expression. That's brilliant, she conceded finally, a genuine professional compliment. It's clean, it's untraceable, and it leverages the target's habits against him. I like the arrogance of it. Arrogance is merely anticipating the inevitable, I stated, my own chest swelling with a proprietary pride. She likes my mind. I moved to the next segment of the plan, pulling up a map of the metropolitan building's main grid. Now, here is the wrinkle, the part where we shift from planning to risk. I will run the primary infiltration of the climate controls from an external network 0.2 blocks away, but the final critical temperature drop sequence requires a physical interface, a maintenance box located 3 floors above the server room. You will have exactly 1 minute and 50 seconds to reach the box, execute the sequence, and move to the server room before the system automatically rights itself. I saw the challenge flare in her eyes, brighter than the city lights outside. Why not run the whole sequence remotely? Why the unnecessary physical risk? Because, I paused, letting the silence draw out, allowing the heat of the game to simmer between us. I want to see you work. I want to see how you adapt when the plan goes sideways. And because Valerius is leaving the building at 20:30 tonight for his mistress's apartment. Luciano has a team tracking him. We hit him while he's moving. That maximizes the chaos and minimizes the chance for Luciano to react intelligently. You, Ghost, are my unpredictable variable. I leaned down until my mouth was inches from her ear, lowering my voice so that the sound was less a directive and more a breathy promise. This is a test, Selena. A test not of your skill, but of your trust in my contingencies. You will be exposed for 30 seconds longer than is comfortable. Her breath hitched, a tiny, ragged sound. It wasn't the risk that got to her. It was the intense physical demand of my proximity, the raw power of the trust I was forcing her to consider. "And if your contingency fails?" she challenged, her voice low and dangerously husky. "Then I will retrieve you myself, and we will rewrite the rules of failure," I promised, stepping back slightly, though the connection lingered, sharp and electric. I needed her to understand that her fate was now my highest priority. "Very well. The plan is sound, the risk is calculated, but the execution needs precision," she conceded, already moving past the theoretical into the practical. "The maintenance box. What's the lock?" "A simple 5-digit numerical code, changed daily." "I will feed it to you the moment you're in the building," I informed her, handing her a small, sleek communication earpiece, a bespoke design that was virtually invisible and impossible to trace. She took the earpiece, her long fingers brushing mine. This time, the spark was unmistakable, a flicker of awareness that neither of us could ignore. "Roman," she said, her voice sharp, a definite warning. "We are business partners. Nothing more. Don't confuse the professional thrill with anything else." I smiled, a genuine wolfish smile. "I confuse nothing, Selena. But shared danger, mia cara, is the fastest route to intimacy. You may hate the cage, but you will soon learn to love the person who holds the key. Now go. The tailor is waiting upstairs, and you need to be fitted for something that doesn't scream, 'I just crawled out of a sewer pipe.' Tonight, we steal a future." I watched her walk toward the lift, her posture rigid, her mind already consumed by the complex, beautiful puzzle I had handed her. She hated me, yes, but she also desperately needed the challenge. And that need was the tightest shackle I could ever forge. She is mine, and tonight, the city will learn what happens when the ghost stops stealing for herself and starts fighting for the dawn.
Chapter 5. Selena, the Dawn's tailor, a fussy man named Antonio, had worked miracles in 4 hours, primarily by ignoring my request for something that blends in and focusing instead on a silhouette worthy of the Dawn's most valuable asset. The result was a suit cut from a midnight blue composite fiber. It looked like heavy silk but was stronger than Kevlar, fully fire retardant, and silent enough that I could run across a carpet of broken glass without a sound. It was functional, ludicrously expensive, and molded to my body in a way that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Distracting, Roman had called my old leather suit. He'd achieved the opposite effect with this new one. It was a magnet for attention, demanding observation. I was 3 minutes into the Metropolitan Building. The air here was stale and fluorescent, a world away from the controlled elegance of Roman's penthouse. Valerius was long gone, speeding toward the West End and his mistress. I was operating on a perfect timeline, thanks entirely to Roman's meticulous planning. Ghost, confirm position. Roman's voice, low and crisp, flowed directly into the bespoke earpiece. It was unsettlingly intimate, like having a predator whisper strategy directly into my brain. Elevator bank 2, maintenance floor 23. Moving to the riser access point now. Thermal signature clear, I responded, my own voice a near whisper. Perfect. I have control of the auxiliary network loop. I'm rerouting the ventilation cameras on floors 20 through 25 to a 6-second buffer. That gives you absolute darkness in motion for the next 90 seconds. Move like you own the place. Move like I own the place. The words were a command and an acknowledgement of my skill. I stepped onto the access door, a simple magnetic latch, and used a micro-frequency oscillator to mimic the security supervisor's keycard signature. The lock clicked. I slipped into the vertical riser shaft. It was cramped, dusty, and full of echoing metallic noise, the kind of environment I usually thrived in, I started my climb, moving 3 floors up toward the critical junction box that controlled the server room climate. Valerius is exiting his vehicle now. The clock is tight, Selena. We need maximum chaos for minimum time. Roman's voice commanded. The urgency in his tone was addictive. It mirrored the electric tension in my muscles. I'm nearly there. Maintenance box is visible, 3 meters above me. I pulled myself onto the small metal ledge beside the junction box. It was locked with the 5-digit numerical code Roman had mentioned. I pulled out my console. Code is live, Roman stated, his voice now a velvet rumble in my ear. 2-7-5-0-4. It will only be valid for 10 seconds. Input and execute the sequence immediately. I am routing the digital maintenance log now to cover your tracks. I input the code with practiced speed. The lock popped open. Inside, a chaotic mess of colored wires and circuit boards. I located the specific interface port I needed, the one controlling the localized AC unit, and plugged in my modified USB stick. Injected, I confirmed, running the sequence. Temperature drop initiated. Understood. You have exactly 1 minute and 40 seconds to reach the 20th floor server room before the system's primary sensor overrides the localized drop. Move, Ghost. Move. The adrenaline hit me like a physical wave. This was the window he had warned me about. The raw, exposed rush of knowing time was my only enemy. I started my descent, moving faster now, sliding down the riser shaft. I reached the service landing for the 20th floor with 20 seconds to spare. I opened the access panel, ready to slip out, when the unexpected happened. The magnetic lock on the inside of the service door had shifted. It was a common flaw in older buildings, where slight changes in air pressure caused the steel plates to bind. It was stuck, not locked, but jammed. I exerted force, but the metal barely shifted. Every second counted. Problem. The service door is jammed, not locked. I hissed into the mic, pressing my body weight against the cold metal. Roman's voice, usually so calm, sharpened with immediate, pure command. Don't force it. You'll trigger the seismic sensors on the floor below. Listen to me, Selena. There is a 2-inch gap on the top corner. Slide your pry bar into the seam, now. I obeyed instantly, reacting to the authority in his tone without question. His contingency planning was already proving its worth. Pry bar in position. Good. Now push forward and down, using the panel hinge as a lever point. I need that door open a foot, no more. And hurry. 50 seconds remaining. I pushed with all my strength. The door groaned, the friction resisting me violently. The small landing was too narrow to get proper leverage. I needed something solid to push against. I don't have the leverage, Roman. I need more mass to push against the hinge. My voice was tight with effort. I'll give you the leverage. His voice was suddenly closer, more commanding, echoing less through the earpiece and more through the tiny metal shaft. Listen to the rhythm of the security lights outside that door. On the next flicker, kick the base plate and use the resulting counterforce of the rebound to heave on the pry bar. Now, I didn't think. I kicked the steel base plate with the heel of my boot, absorbing the sharp, jarring impact. The rebound was immediate. I used the counterforce, driving my entire body weight into the pry bar, pushing down and forward on the hinge. With a shriek of tortured metal, the door gave, sliding open just enough for me to squeeze through. About 14 inches of space. I tumbled out, landing in the quiet service hallway, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 30 seconds, Ghost! You're exposed! Roman's voice was ragged with shared adrenaline. I didn't wait. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted down the hallway toward the server room. The temperature drop would have been active for over a minute now. I had 10 seconds to execute the data dump. The server room door was indeed open. One of the bored guards was sticking his head out. complaining loudly into a radio about the sudden drop in temperature. His back was to me. I moved into the server room like an extension of the cool air, silent and unseen. The second guard was by the main racks, shivering and cursing. The biometric scanner was dark, flashing an error message. Thermal anomaly. Roman was right. I located Valerius's specific rack, pulled out the external access port, and plugged in my second bespoke flash drive, this one loaded with the modified data Roman needed to plant. The transfer light blinked, silent and fast. Roman, initiating transfer. Valerius's key is validating the encrypted handshake now. I see it. Perfect, he murmured, the tension finally easing from his voice. You have 5 seconds. Get out now. System override in 4. I snatched the drive, spun on my heel, and melted back toward the jammed door. The guard was still complaining to his radio. I didn't stop to resecure the door. Instead, I ducked into a small, dark utility alcove just around the corner from the server room, pulling myself into the shadows behind a stack of unused cleaning supplies. The main system whirred back to life. The temperature in the hallway instantly began to climb back toward the prescribed 68 degrees. The biometric scanner light flickered green. The guard finally turned and walked back into the now warming server room, sealing the door behind him. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, the surge of success almost painful in its intensity. The mission was executed flawlessly. But the cost of that success was the immediate, raw intimacy of having fought a physical battle under his minute-by-minute direction. Status ghost, Roman demanded, his voice now lower, less clinical. Secure. Data implanted, narrative successful. The hinge held, I whispered back, my voice shaking slightly, not from fear but from the electric hum of the adrenaline crash. I know the hinge held, Roman said, a subtle, possessive pride coating his words. I'm routing you to the subterranean parking garage now. I'll meet you there in 5 minutes. Do not engage anyone. Do not linger. I started to move, but paused. The feeling of his proximity, the sound of his strained voice in my ear as he waited for me to succeed, was dangerously addictive. What about the failure contingency you promised? I asked, challenging him, pushing the boundary. A low, resonant chuckle echoed in the earpiece. The contingency, mia cara, was that I would be the first thing you heard and the last thing you thought of, and you almost ruined the beautiful plan by getting stuck in a door. I saved the plan by getting unstuck from a door, I corrected sharply, then felt an overwhelming need to inject some levity into the suffocating tension. Also, Don Costello, your tailor needs to learn what blends in means. This suit is going to get me noticed by every security camera from here to Rome. I'm counting on it, he retorted, his voice thick with a sudden, palpable heat. The ghost is meant to be unseen, but my asset is meant to be recognized. Now move. The vehicle is waiting. And Selena, don't take the stairs. I moved, feeling the familiar, cold efficiency return to my core. I was a weapon, and he was the master strategist. But tonight, moving as one, fighting against the clock with his voice as my only anchor, I felt less like a prisoner, and more like an equal partner in a dangerous, exhilarating dance. The professional line had not just been crossed, it had been incinerated by the shared life-or-death rush of adrenaline. As I took the final, secure route to the underground garage, my mind was already replaying the moment his voice had intensified, the moment he'd put himself in the crosshairs of my failure. It wasn't about the job anymore. It was about the way he made me feel when the stakes were highest. That was the most dangerous theft of all.
Chapter 6. Roman. The ride back to the penthouse was a masterclass in controlled silence. The mission had been a success. Luciano's primary financial counsel was compromised. The planting of the false log was flawless, and the resulting chaos in the Metropolitan building was already reaching my network feeds. Luciano would spend the next 2 weeks hunting down phantom internal corruption, blinding him to our real movements. It was exquisite. But my victory had little to do with Luciano. It was entirely about the woman seated beside me in the back of the armored Maybach. Selena was a contradiction. Her body was rigid, still vibrating with the high-frequency tension of the successful infiltration. Yet her mind was already miles away, dissecting my every command, searching for the fatal flaw in my strategy. The midnight blue suit the tailor had rushed was now dusted with concrete particulate from the riser shaft and strained across her shoulders, highlighting the raw athleticism of her movements. She looked like a bruised, beautiful trophy. I could feel the residual heat radiating from her skin. The physical demands of the job were draining the adrenaline from her system, leaving her exposed. This was the moment of professional weakness, and it was the moment I chose to press my advantage, not physically, but psychologically. "That was a near thing with the door," I commented, breaking the silence, my voice low. She shifted, leaning her head back against the leather seat. "The jam wasn't on the schematic you provided. An oversight, Roman. Your vaunted contingency was a split-second, non-standard instruction delivered under duress. That's improvisation, not planning. You exposed me for 45 seconds longer than necessary." I tilted my head, admiring the precision of her complaint. "You're right. My schematic was out of date. The flaw was not in the plan, but in the intelligence gathering. A human error, I assure you, will not be repeated. But you adapted perfectly." The heel kick was inspired. Most professionals would panic and try to brute force the lock. "I don't panic," she stated flatly, then added with a dry edge. "And I had a highly motivated commander whispering creative violence into my ear. It would have been rude not to comply." A genuine smile, rare and dangerous, touched my lips. The banter, I note, returns with the successful outcome. A good sign. You only joke when you feel truly safe or truly victorious. "I feel neither," she countered immediately, turning her intense gaze toward me. "I feel indebted, obligated, and intensely curious about what you consider a fitting reward for my competence." "Not cash," you said. "So what? A villa? A new alias? Or simply the survival of my sister?" "The survival of your sister is the cost of entry, not the prize," I corrected, reaching across the console to gently touch the dust on her left shoulder. It was a calculated move, intimate and professional at once. "The prize for competence is access, Selena. Access to my world. And more importantly, access to what you crave most. The infinite challenge." The car slid smoothly into the subterranean garage of the penthouse, the doors opening into a private, climate-controlled bay. I bypassed the elevator that led to the command center, leading her instead toward a separate, unmarked security door deep within the garage. She paused, her hand instinctively going to the empty space on her thigh where her old pry bar kit used to sit. "Where are we going, Roman?" "To your reward," I replied, touching my palm to a concealed scanner. The door hissed open, revealing a narrow, descending staircase clad in dark oak and brushed metal, leading away from the light. "The debrief on Luciano can wait. First, we need to address the needs of the architect." We descended into what felt like a different building entirely. This area was not about high-tech surveillance or financial displays. It was built for solitude and thought. The stairs opened into a vast, curved chamber carved directly into the bedrock beneath the tower. The walls were lined not with art, but with bookshelves that climbed 20 feet high, filled with ancient texts, rare manuscripts, and modern treatises on cryptography, linguistics, and mathematics. In the center, a single antique wood desk was bathed in the warm, focused light of a brass lamp. To one side, a state-of-the-art digital media wall glowed softly, featuring interfaces for global news feeds, stock tickers, and an open-source coding sandbox. Selena stopped dead, her eyes wide, taking in the sheer scope of the space. Her composure cracked, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. "What is this place?" she whispered, walking slowly, reverently, toward the nearest shelf. "Your cage, expanded," I stated, following her. "It is my private archive, my library, and my workspace when I require true silence. And now it is yours. The ghost thrives on information and silence. You have both here, beyond the reach of the outside world, and largely beyond the reach of even my own men." She ran her fingers along the spine of a leather-bound book, an original first edition of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. "You've stocked this for me." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation wrapped in disbelief. "I prefer my assets to be intellectually engaged. I have noted your predilection for classical philosophy, advanced encryption theory, and, curiously, 19th century French poetry. You will find all three accounted for here. The digital interface is live and connected to every protected server I own, containing data streams the outside world believes are impossible to access. Use it. Abuse it. Dissect my enemies and expose their weaknesses. This is where you become the weapon, Selena." I watched the conflict raging in her eyes. This wasn't a golden shackle. It was a key to a vault she never knew existed, a personalized challenge that catered to the deepest part of her mind. "You think this is enough to buy my loyalty?" she asked, her voice regaining its edge, trying to reject the bait. "Loyalty? Number. Loyalty is cheap and breakable," I countered, stepping close behind her, my hands settling on her shoulders, the midnight blue fabric yielding beneath my touch. The movement was possessive, undeniable. "I am buying your curiosity, your need to understand the puzzle, your addiction to the impossible. You can leave now, Selena. Walk out the door, take the diamond, and go back to hiding. But you will spend the rest of your life wondering what secrets are held within these walls. That, Mia Cara, is the better trap." I felt the tension in her neck and shoulders, the residual muscle knots from the intense concentration. I began to massage the pressure points gently, professionally, moving my thumbs along the sharp line of her collarbone. She stiffened, but did not pull away. "Stop that," she ordered, though the command lacked conviction. "Why?" I murmured, leaning down, my mouth close to the shell of her ear. "Are you afraid that a moment of simple physical release will compromise the fierce independence you cling to? You moved like fire and steel tonight, Selena. You are exhausted. Let the tension go. You are safe here. You are mine." The last words were a deep, gravelly, possessive rumble. Not a threat, but a statement of absolute fact. She finally pulled away, turning to face me, her eyes dark and turbulent. Her hand came up, not to strike, but to steady herself on my chest, fingers gripping the fine wool of my suit jacket. "That possessiveness, Roman, is dangerous. It's a weakness," she warned, her breath catching slightly. "I know," I confessed, dropping my facade for a fleeting, dangerous second. I stepped back, letting the distance reassert itself, but only after ensuring the heat of my touch lingered. When I saw the security feed of that door jamming, when your voice tightened in the earpiece, The urge I felt was not professional concern. It was a raw, primal need to rip that door off its hinges and shield you with my own body. That feeling, that is new. It is weakness. And I will not tolerate it. I walked back toward the antique desk and picked up the small, bespoke earpiece she had discarded on the surface. This will come out now. It's still connected to the secure line, I instructed, moving to her, my focus entirely on the device. I reached up, my thumb and forefinger brushing the soft curve of her earlobe as I gently extracted the tiny communication device. The proximity, the careful focus of the task, felt intensely personal. I lingered, my thumb tracing the sensitive skin behind her ear. Her eyes closed for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surrender that was more revealing than any full-blown confession. Your reward is not just this room, Selena. It is the understanding that you are essential to my operation, my most critical asset. And I protect what is mine with the same ruthlessness I used to build this empire. I murmured, my voice losing all trace of professionalism, becoming raw desire. You are the challenge I cannot afford to lose. I dropped the earpiece onto the desk with a sharp clack, breaking the spell. Take the rest of the night. Sleep. Read, plan. But know this. Every hour you spend here is another hour you spend unraveling the secrets of my enemies and the secrets of the cage you find yourself in. My expectations are high, but my contingencies for keeping you here are higher. I turned, leaving her alone in the immense, silent library. I knew she wouldn't sleep. She would spend the next 8 hours cataloging the weaknesses of my fortress, planning the precise moment of her escape. But she would do it surrounded by my gifts, and she would do it with the unsettling realization that her jailer was now emotionally invested in her survival. My weakness is her safety, and that is the tightest knot of all.
Chapter 7. Selena. The silence of the archive was thick, profound, and utterly intoxicating. It was everything the penthouse wasn't. A vast, subterranean space dedicated to information, not display. The floor-to-ceiling bookshelves created canyons of knowledge, and the digital media wall hummed with the silent promise of global access. Roman called it an expanded cage. Selena called it a treasure trove of weaknesses. It had been 48 hours since the Valerius hit. Selena had used the time exactly as Roman predicted. Not sleeping, not relaxing, but planning. The first step was internalizing the space. She'd performed a full deep scan analysis of the archive's internal network, using the coding sandbox Roman had provided. She needed to understand how his invulnerable system breathed. The penthouse security, the passive induction coils, the airflow monitors, was still in effect here. But the archive's system, while powerful, had a different signature. It was designed to pull information in and keep it contained, making it less about physical barriers and more about intellectual ones. The data streams here were too rich, too diverse, to be locked down by a simple kill switch. Her escape wouldn't be physical. It would be a digital dissolution, leaving no trace behind but a phantom echo. She was currently deep into the firewall structure. Roman had built his system using a proprietary, layered encryption model based on quantum entanglement theory. A complex, elegant mess of code that made the Pentagon's firewalls look like a bicycle lock. It was designed to keep people out. But Selena had already found the perfect, minute vulnerability, the open-source coding sandbox itself. Roman had left it unsandboxed, a professional courtesy that allowed her to use outside tools, but also gave her the potential to exploit the shared kernel memory. A beautiful, arrogant mistake. "It's a digital escape tunnel, and he carved it for me himself," she muttered, a reluctant grin touching her lips. The thrill was intense. It wasn't just planning an escape, it was solving the most challenging puzzle of her career. The plan was detailed, cold, and flawless. Phase 1. Data extraction. Use the sandbox to launch a zero-day exploit, gaining root access to the central server, while simultaneously injecting a custom script that would scrub her unique biometric data from the archives. Phase 2. Physical exit. Use the root access to manually override the locking mechanisms on the main service lift, leading to the basement and the external access tunnels. This required a minimum 3-minute window. Phase 3. Cover. Execute a massive systemic data dump, a digital white noise, onto Roman's entire network, paralyzing his system for 48 hours while she disappeared. She was moments away from deploying a test sequence when she paused, her focus suddenly shifting. Before she disappeared forever, she needed one last, absolute confirmation of her sister's safety. She had to breach the human network, the one Roman had boasted about. She logged into the encrypted internal messaging system, the one Roman used for his most trusted, non-mafia personal staff. The connection was flawless. She pulled up the ID Roman had given her, Overseer Geneva 1. She watched the feed, not live video, too easy to fake, but the detailed daily reports, signed and dated, of her sister's progress. Physical therapy successful, appetite improved, no change in the baseline memory function. The facility was state-of-the-art, discreet, and ruinously expensive. Selena saw the costs billed directly to Roman Costello's personal foundation. It was all clinically professional, a ledger of transaction. Then she stumbled across an auxiliary file, flagged under the same secure ID, but titled simply, Project Aurora, Ongoing. Curiosity, the true weakness Roman had exploited, forced her hand. She cracked the file open, a simple 128-bit encryption standing in her way. It took her less than 10 seconds. The file wasn't about extortion, leverage, or rivals. It was about a non-profit health initiative. Project Aurora was a series of free, anonymous clinics Roman funded in the city's poorest, most crime-ridden districts, areas entirely separate from the Dawn's operations. They specialized in providing care for children and the elderly, requiring no IDS, asking no questions, offering sanctuary. The clinic was set up to prevent rival families from recruiting kids who were desperate for cash to cover medical bills. It wasn't about power, it was about protection, provided through anonymity and resources. And the reason the Geneva overseer managed it? The final shocking piece of data. The file contained a single photo, a faded image of a teenage Roman, younger, less guarded, standing next to a tiny, frail woman who looked like his mother. A small note was scribbled beneath the photo, signed by the Geneva doctor. He keeps the clinics open. He remembers the cold. Selena froze, the digital glare of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Roman Costello, the ruthless Dawn, the sophisticated collector of people, ran a secret, anonymous network of care for the vulnerable, entirely divorced from his criminal enterprise. This wasn't a trap. This was a vulnerability he hadn't planned to share. A secret altruism that clashed violently with the charcoal suits and the cold, possessive gaze. He remembers the cold. He wasn't just a monster. He was a complex machine built from trauma and control, with a singular, hidden soft spot for the defenseless. The discovery hit her with a terrible, nauseating wave of guilt. For the first time since she'd been trapped, her plan felt less like a professional necessity and more like a cruel, personal betrayal. He saved my sister, not for a debt, but because he saw a vulnerability he understood. "Stop it, Selena," she whispered to herself, slamming her fists lightly onto the desk. He's still a killer. He's still a blackmailer. This is a distraction, a calculated show of humanity to make the betrayal harder. But she knew it wasn't a show. she knew arrogance. This kind of hidden, anonymous kindness was too vulnerable to be faked. If Luciano found out Roman had a soft spot for nameless children in the slums, it would be his immediate, devastating target. The professional thrill of the escape had curdled. Her perfect, elegant plan now involved collapsing the network of a man who was quietly protecting the very people she herself had always been too cautious to help. The man who had eliminated her fear was now generating her guilt. A sudden loud sound in the penthouse above shattered the silence of the archive. A heavy, rhythmic thud, thud, thud coming from the gym Roman had pointed out earlier. He was training. He was venting the immense coiled energy she knew he possessed. She realized, with a rush of humiliating clarity, that she was addicted to his mind, to his challenge, and now, to the confusing, dangerous complexity of his hidden heart. The physical tension that constantly hummed between them, the sizzling heat born of two apex minds meeting, was now layered with a devastating, emotional depth. She wasn't just attracted to the Dawn, she was dangerously close to understanding the man. I rose from the desk, pushing the Project Aurora file to the side. Her heart was pounding, no longer from the adrenaline of a successful heist, but from the fear of her own changing allegiances. She walked to the far end of the archive, where a glass-fronted wine cooler stood. She pulled out the bottle of Haut Briand, the one next to the diamond. It was too valuable to drink alone, but she needed a reason to clear her head. As she looked at the wine, her eyes caught the cold, magnificent blue of the Tears of Aethelred. The diamond was pure freedom, but the wine, the archive, the challenges, the hidden kindness, that was Roman. And that, she realized, was the life she was being asked to steal herself away from. She put the wine back, untouched. She couldn't drink the peace of his home while plotting his destruction. The plan is still on, she determined, walking back to the desk and reactivating the sandbox. But the stakes have changed. I'm no longer escaping a cage. I'm abandoning a partner. And I need to know why I'm willing to leave the only challenge that has ever truly engaged me. She had 3 days until her planned exit window. 3 days to find a way to escape without torching Project Aurora. 3 days to find a flaw in Roman's character that would justify the betrayal. And 3 days to stop falling for the brilliant, ruthless monster who kept saving her.
Chapter 8. Roman. I stood in the command center, the city lights below an irrelevant, glittering spectacle, while my attention was focused entirely on a small, dark corner of the system interface. The network monitors displayed the low traffic activity within the archive, and specifically, the sandbox that was Selena's current playground. She was good. Better than I had anticipated. For the last 3 days, she had been meticulously running dry fire drills on the internal firewall. She hadn't just found the vulnerability I'd left in the sandbox. She had optimized it. Her approach was elegant, favoring surgical precision over brute force. She wasn't just stealing her freedom. She was trying to prove a theorem. The sandbox being unsandboxed was a calculated risk. It allowed her full access to the kernel memory, yes, but it also gave me full access to the geometry of her mind. I knew the precise second she had accessed the Project Aurora file. I knew the millisecond her script had stalled, forcing her to confront the emotional cost of her betrayal. I had seen the pause, the flicker of confusion, the glimmer of guilt that had nearly derailed her perfect, cold efficiency. You found the flaw, Ghost. But the flaw was never in the code. It was always in the architect. I felt a familiar, sharp pang of possessive satisfaction. She was starting to internalize the beautiful, terrifying complexity of my world. The power dynamic was shifting from jailer/prisoner to predator/partner. And that transition was intoxicating. I waited until the clock struck midnight, the precise moment her coded escape trigger was set to deploy 2 days from now, before making my move. I sent a single encrypted text message to the screen in the archive. The view from the rooftop garden is spectacular tonight. Bring the 1961 Haut-Brion R. The wine was a test. It was expensive, vintage, and irreplaceable. A small, physical reminder of the stakes. If she came up empty-handed, it meant she still saw herself as a thief. If she came with the bottle, it meant she was accepting the role of the partner. 10 minutes later, the private elevator chimed. I was waiting for her on the rooftop garden, a minimalist space of steel and glass that offered a 360-degree, dizzying view of my domain. The night air was cool, carrying the distant, muffled sound of the city's constant noise. Selena emerged, wearing a silk dress I had commissioned, less tactical, more dangerously sensual, and she was holding the bottle of Haut-Brion, wrapped carefully in a thin linen cloth. She looked exquisite, a creature of high-end espionage walking into an arboreal maze. I prefer a good single malt, but you specified the 1961, she stated, her voice cool, but with an underlying tension I recognized as suppressed excitement. The 1961 is the pinnacle of its vintage. It is a study in calculated risk. It could have collapsed into vinegar, but instead it achieved perfection. Much like our operation on Valerius, I countered, taking the bottle from her and setting it on a small glass table. I popped the cork expertly. Sit, Selena. We need to talk about your recent network reconnaissance. Her posture instantly stiffened, the subtle relaxation vanishing. She sat, but her hands were clasped in front of her, ready for a fight. I was simply auditing the system you provided access to, she said, her expression impenetrable. A good partner understands the full scope of their environment. A sentiment I fully agree with, I said, pouring 2 glasses of the deep garnet wine. I passed one to her. But let's dispense with the lies, shall we? You found the sandbox vulnerability. You exploited the shared kernel memory. Your digital footprint clearly shows that you've created a flawless script for a systemic data dump that would paralyze my entire network for 48 hours, giving you a completely untraceable exit. You've even calculated the delay necessary to scrub your biometrics from the physical records. The air crackled. She didn't flinch. She took a slow, deliberate sip of the wine, her dark eyes never leaving mine. It was phase 3 of a contingency plan, she admitted, her voice low and steady. An elegant exit strategy for a partnership founded on blackmail. If I'm to be your weapon, Roman, I must always retain the ability to self-destruct if the target shifts. You knew I would look for the exit. It's my professional obligation. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, the expensive scent of the wine mixing with the subtle musk of her perfume. And that, Selena, is why I haven't punished you. Because you are, professionally, without peer. But the truth is, the system you created, the one that guarantees your escape, it was a little slow, a bit clunky. I had the counterscript running 72 hours before you even started coding. Her control wavered for the first time. A flash of pure, professional shock crossed her face. The exploit was clunky, she scoffed, genuinely insulted. Compared to my defense? Yes. It would have failed at the 3rd firewall layer. I would have let you get to the basement, watched you initiate the data dump, and then the counter script would have activated, locking you down there, exposing you to the city police who would be waiting, I explained, my voice gentle, almost regretful. A messy outcome, but a necessary one to ensure my empire's integrity. I paused, allowing her to absorb the reality of her defeat. Her perfect, elegant plan was a lie. But here is the fascinating part, Selena, I continued, my voice dropping, becoming intimate. I watched you find Project Aurora. I saw the exact second you saw the photo of my mother and the doctor's note. He remembers the cold. And in that moment, your beautiful, logical plan became riddled with moral complications. You were no longer trying to steal your freedom. You were trying to find a way to escape without burning down the free clinics that protect the nameless children I cannot openly save. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers where it rested on the cool glass. The contact was a slow burn, a shocking admission of my own surveillance, and an even more shocking acknowledgement of her conscience. You believe that I, the Don, am a monster. And I am. But I was once a cold, defenseless boy with a parent who died needing help the system wouldn't provide. The clinics are not leverage against my rivals. They are my personal assurance that no child in my city suffers the indignity of being forgotten by the powerful. You saw that. And the moment you saw it, you became the only person in my life who saw Roman and not Costello. I tightened my grip on her hand, forcing her to look into my eyes. The sexual tension was now secondary to the overwhelming weight of the shared vulnerability. Your escape script, perfect as it was, needed one final push to work. A manual override on the primary network governor to handle the backwash of the data dump. That governor is in my office, sealed behind a 5-inch steel plate, requiring my unique retinal scan and a 6-digit key I change hourly. It is the one lock you cannot pick. I leaned closer, my voice a husky promise. I told you I collect things I cannot afford to lose. And now, I cannot afford to lose the woman who chooses to protect my ghosts, even while planning my destruction. I do not want an unwilling prisoner, Selena. I want a willing partner. I slid a small silver keycard across the glass table. It was perfectly blank. Tonight, at 3 o'clock hours, I will manually initiate a 2-minute maintenance window on the network governor. For those 2 minutes, that plate will be unlocked, and the 6-digit code will be the birth date of my sister, the one who died from the cold. The code will be 1-2-1-9-8-4. That is the key to the ultimate lock. The one I change hourly. The one I have never shared. The one that will neutralize my counter-script and allow your clean escape. Selena's breath caught, her eyes wide, disbelief and a terrifying, profound understanding warring in their depths. You're letting me go, she breathed, the wine glass shaking slightly in her hand. I am giving you the choice you were blackmailed out of, I corrected, pulling my hand away. You will have a 2-minute window. You can take this card, activate the maintenance window, escape flawlessly, and be truly free. Your sister's security detail will remain in place, undisturbed, paid for life by an untraceable offshore account I established this afternoon. There will be zero consequence for your freedom. I rose to my feet, walking to the edge of the rooftop. The wind was high here, whipping the folds of my suit jacket around me. But you will spend the rest of your life knowing that you turned your back on the most challenging, exhilarating, and honest partnership you will ever encounter. You will know that the man who wanted to trap you was the only man who ever willingly gave you the key to the door, hoping you would choose to stay. I turned back to face her, the intensity of my gaze absolute. The door is open, Ghost. I have removed the cage, the leverage, and the consequence. The time for plotting is over. You have 2 days to decide if freedom is defined by running from a monster or standing beside him, choosing to fight the entire world together. If you choose to run, I will respect it, but I will never forgive it. I didn't wait for her response. I simply left the single silver card on the table next to the bottle of Haut-Brion, leaving her alone on the rooftop, suspended between the glittering city and the devastating, unburdened truth of her choice. Let her choose the weight of her conscience over the thrill of the escape. Let her choose me.
Chapter 9. Selena. The silver keycard was cold against my palm, a meaningless sliver of metal that represented everything I had ever chased. Unburdened, consequence-free freedom. It had been 18 hours since Roman left me on the rooftop with the key and the agonizing truth. The digital clock on the command center interface in the archive glowed. 1:42:11, the 2-minute maintenance window, my window for a clean, untraceable escape, was set for 3 a.m. Time was now a physical, crushing weight, pressing down on the 2 choices that defined my existence. I walked through the archive, unable to sit, unable to focus on the endless supply of encrypted files he'd left for me. My mind, usually a clean, efficient machine of logic and precision, was a battlefield. Run, the ghost's voice, cool and logical. The leverage is removed, your sister is safe, and the exit is clean. You escape the cage, reclaim your autonomy, and go back to being unseen, untouchable. Stay. The woman's voice, a tight, unfamiliar ache in my chest. If you leave, you are running from the only man who ever truly saw you. You are running from the only life that has ever mattered. I reached the glass wine cellar and pulled out the bottle of 1961 Haut-Brion, the one Roman had offered me on the rooftop. I set it on the desk and then, for comparison, I pulled out the Tears of Aethelred. The diamond, the initial cause of this magnificent catastrophe, glittered coldly under the lamp. It was meaningless. A beautiful lie. When I stole for the blackmailer, the diamond represented my sister's safety. Now that Roman had removed the threat, the diamond was just a marker of value. Selling it would buy me a lifetime of comfort. But comfort was a prison made of velvet. Roman offered a life of constant adrenaline, intellectual combat, and the supreme addictive challenge of always operating at the limits of my ability. He offered me a purpose that extended beyond mere survival. I felt a pang of profound, sickening guilt. If I executed my escape plan, the elegant, flawless script I had coded, I would effectively be betraying the hidden, complicated man who ran Project Aurora. The man who remembered the cold. The man who willingly put his most critical, final, uncrackable lock on the line just to test my heart. He gave me the code, 1-2-1-9-8-4, his dead sister's birthday. He entrusted me with his deepest vulnerability, a secret that could shatter his control and expose his weakness to his rivals. That trust was a more valuable asset than the diamond, the penthouse, or the entire Costello organization combined. I put the diamond away, disgusted by its simple honesty. I picked up the silver keycard. I decided I needed to see the lock one last time. I needed to stand at the precipice of my freedom and understand exactly why I was terrified to jump. I left the archive and took the private elevator to the penthouse's command center floor. I was no longer sneaking. I was testing the system one last time, with the implicit permission of the man who ran it. The command center was dark, the only illumination coming from the muted, standby glow of the primary display screens. Roman was not here. He would be in his office, or perhaps his master suite, waiting. Waiting for the sound of my footsteps in the halls, or the dreaded ping of his firewall system notifying him that the maintenance window had been manually triggered. I walked into his private office, a sleek, minimalist chamber of polished dark wood and tactical efficiency. I moved to the rear wall, where the secure network governor panel was located. It wasn't hidden. It was simply intimidating. It was a plate of 5-inch steel, secured by heavy-duty bolts and framed by a biometric retinal scanner. It was the heart of his empire, the ultimate failsafe, the lock I could never pick. I stood before it, the silver card in my hand, running through the steps in my mind. 025830. Insert the silver card into the auxiliary port below the biometric scanner. 25900. Scan my retina, the one he had authorized. The system would acknowledge the physical presence of the card and my eye, verifying I was the designated operative. 03:00:00:. The steel plate would unlock, retracting the bolts. A digital keypad would appear. 030015. I would input the code 1-2-1-9-8-4. 030100. I would access the internal network governor and inject the finalized escape script, neutralizing his counter script and initiating my digital dissolution. 30200. The maintenance window closes. I am gone. The plan was perfect, flawless. It guaranteed my continued existence as the ghost, free, solvent, and safe from Roman Costello's reach. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize that life. A new apartment in Paris, a safe house in Istanbul, high-stakes contracts for private collectors, and the quiet satisfaction of total self-reliance. It should have been exhilarating. Instead, I felt a deep, profound emptiness. The challenges would be easy. The conversation would be dull. I would be forever looking for a worthy adversary, a mind that could match mine, a gaze that could hold mine without flinching. I would be alone, with no shared adrenaline, no dry banter, and no terrifying, thrilling reliance on another human being. I would be choosing perpetual boredom over exhilarating chaos. I opened my eyes, staring at the intimidating steel plate. Roman had said, "The door is open, Ghost. I have removed the cage, the leverage, and the consequence. You have 2 days to decide if freedom is defined by running from a monster or standing beside him, choosing to fight the entire world together." I realized the ultimate truth of the last 3 weeks. He never wanted the ghost to be free. He wanted the woman, Selena, to choose the cage. And I did. Because the cage was no longer a prison, it was a partnership. I reached out, but not for the scanner. I placed the silver keycard gently on Roman's desk, next to his antique inkwell. I left it face up, a silent, visible sign of my decision. The ultimate, uncrackable lock was now officially the lock that held me in place. With the choice made, the heavy weight of conflict vanished, replaced by an intoxicating, pure clarity. I finally understood what the tension had been. Not fear of capture, but fear of losing the challenge. I turned away from the panel no longer. The ghost plotting an escape, but a partner preparing for a reckoning. I had to find him. Now. Before the clock hit 3 o'clock, before he sat there alone in his suite, anticipating my betrayal, anticipating the silence of the notification that would confirm I had abandoned him. I needed to stop the clock on his vulnerability. I left the office, moving swiftly through the silent, enormous penthouse. I didn't take the lift. I took the stairs, not to escape, but because the raw, physical exertion was the only thing that could match the sheer, overwhelming intensity of my decision. I found him in the master suite, exactly where I had left him 20 hours ago. He was seated by the massive window overlooking the city, bathed in the soft, muted light of the street lamps far below. He wasn't working. He was simply waiting, the portrait of controlled tension. He wore a simple black silk robe, and a glass of Macallan sat untouched on the side table. He didn't turn around when I entered. He knew I was there. He knew my specific weight, my silent footfall, my presence. 1 minute and 45 seconds left, Selena, he stated, his voice a low, steady rumble, focused entirely on the city lights. It's 2:58:15. You should be in my office now, inserting the card. I walked toward him, the sound of my steps deliberately heavy, breaking the calculated silence of his weight. I stopped just a foot behind him, close enough to feel the slight warmth radiating off his silk-clad shoulders. I was there, I confessed, my voice low and husky, thick with the weight of my emotional surrender. I was in your office. I saw the panel. I saw the retinal scanner. I had the silver card in my hand. The clock ticked silently. 02:59:00. Roman still didn't move. His focus remained fixed on the city. His control absolute. And you decided that the risk of me hunting you down was too high, he surmised, his voice flat, devoid of triumph. No, I disagreed, my voice trembling slightly with the profound, undeniable truth. I decided that running from you was a greater form of betrayal than any betrayal I could inflict upon you. The freedom you offered me was a better prison than the freedom I knew. I can't go back to being unseen, Roman. I can't go back to being bored. I reached out, my hand landing gently on the solid, muscled curve of his shoulder, the silk soft beneath my palm. It was the first time I had initiated contact purely out of need, not strategy. 02:59:30. He remained still, allowing my touch, allowing the weight of the moment to settle between us. So you're saying you chose the cage, he stated, a subtle inflection of challenge in his voice. No, Roman. I'm saying I chose the architect, I whispered, closing the last physical and emotional distance between us. I chose the man who sees my chaos and still gives me the tools to challenge him. I chose the man who risks his entire empire to protect nameless children. I chose you. 02:59:55. I tightened my hand on his shoulder. I had the chance to leave, Roman. The door was open. I didn't take it. 03:00:00. The time of my perfect escape had come and gone in the space of a confession. Finally, he moved. He turned, the silk robe pooling around him, his dark eyes ablaze with a mixture of overwhelming relief, raw desire, and fierce, triumphant possession. The control was gone, replaced by something wild and intensely personal. You stubborn, magnificent ghost, he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached up, cupping my face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle, yet undeniably firm. The sexual tension that had been simmering between us for days, fueled by shared danger, banter, and intellectual warfare, finally erupted hot and consuming. You are mine, Selena, he vowed, his eyes boring into mine, his thumb stroking the soft skin beneath my ear. And I will never let you be bored again. He didn't wait for my response. His mouth descended on mine, a kiss that was a conquest and a surrender all at once, demanding, consuming, and utterly perfect. It tasted of old Macallan, expensive silk, and the terrifying, thrilling promise of a shared future in the shadows. I kissed him back, pouring every ounce of my suppressed desire, fear, and ultimate commitment into the contact. The ghost was dead. The woman had finally found her home.
Chapter 10. Roman. The silver key card was gone. I knew that before the private elevator had deposited me back into the master suite, 2 floors below the rooftop garden where I had just laid my heart bare. I hadn't looked back, hadn't needed to. Selena, being Selena, would have picked up the key immediately, tucking it away like a secret weapon or a promise. Or, in this case, the detonator to her freedom. I didn't try to track her movements. I had disabled the passive environmental monitoring in the North Wing the moment I handed her the key. If this was to be a true, unburdened choice, I needed to grant her genuine privacy, even from my own omnipresent eyes. I needed to know, with absolute certainty, that if she walked away, it would be because the silence of the rest of the world genuinely called to her more than the challenge I represented. I poured a single glass of Macallan, though I knew I wouldn't drink it. I wasn't pacing either. Pacing was for the nervous, the insecure. I was the architect. I had planned every variable, calculated every contingency, and now I was forced into the most terrifying position of all: surrender. The outcome was entirely in her hands. My absolute control had ended the moment I realized I preferred her willing partnership to her forced possession. I sat by the window, the expanse of the city a cold, glittering map of my domain. But for the first time in my career, the empire felt distant, dull, and entirely secondary to the ticking digital clock in my mind. The time was 00:30. I had 2.5 hours until the designated escape window. 2.5 hours until I knew whether I had won the only battle that mattered. She is choosing between the ghost and the woman, I thought, running a hand over the dark silk of my robe. And I have to be ready for either outcome. The potential failure didn't involve a bullet or a rival's knife. It involved the chilling, profound silence of the network governor pinging my console with the maintenance-initiated alert. That would be the sound of her choosing the clean escape, of her walking away from the chaos and complexity I offered. It would be the confirmation that my own vulnerability, the hidden kindness of Project Aurora, and the exposed wound of my sister's birth date wasn't enough to hold her. And if that alert came, I would honor my word. Her sister would remain safe, her account permanently funded, and I would spend the rest of my life chasing a shadow that had willingly turned its back on the light. It was a terrifying, necessary sacrifice to prove the integrity of my offer. I had to let her believe she could hurt me, because only then could she truly choose to stay. I thought back to our shared mission, the frantic moments in the riser shaft, the sudden overwhelming urge to reach out and pull her to safety when the door jammed. The professional bond had broken then, dissolving into raw, possessive need. I hadn't just given her an escape route. I had given her a reason to choose the world she was in. The thrill, I realized, watching the slow, dark sweep of the night over the city. That's what she's addicted to. But the adrenaline of theft is temporary. The adrenaline of fighting the world together, that is permanent. The minutes dragged, heavy and agonizing. I distracted myself by running financial simulations in my head, calculating the potential damage Luciano could inflict if he ever discovered the truth about Project Aurora. The consequences were immense. But even that high-stakes analysis felt tepid compared to the sheer existential weight of waiting for her choice. Around 2:45, I felt a change in the atmosphere, a subtle shift in the current, or perhaps just the heightened perception of a man anticipating a crucial moment. I looked down at the digital display on my watch. 02:50:11. I stood up and moved away from the window, walking over to the office section of the suite. The 6-digit code 1-2-1-9-8-4 was already input into the security console on the desk. All I had to do was press Enter to initiate the 2-minute window. At 2:58, I pressed the button. The primary network governor in the office was now unlocked. The 5-inch steel plate was silently retracting on the wall, and the digital keypad had just flickered to life. The system was live. The door was open. I had willingly put my throat into her hand. I retreated to the sofa by the window, my heart now hammering with the frantic pace I hadn't allowed myself earlier. The final moments were upon me. 2:58:30. She should be in the office, silver keycard in hand, preparing her retina scan. I focused my gaze on the digital display on the far side of the room. It was muted, but it would flash red if the maintenance script was injected, the silent alarm confirming my loss. 2 hours, 59 minutes, 0 seconds. 30 seconds left. The silence of the penthouse was immense, terrifying. Was she there? Was she standing before the panel, the cold truth of her freedom finally in her grasp? Choose me, Selena. Choose the chaos. Choose the fight. 2:59:15. I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound of a footstep. Not the silent, undetectable drift of the ghost, but the solid, deliberate step of a woman walking with purpose. And they were coming from the hallway, not the office. My entire body locked down. The footfalls were heavy, rhythmic, and intentional. She wasn't crawling through a vent or using a silent exit. She was walking into my private chamber. The silk robe felt suddenly suffocating. I gripped the arms of the chair, forcing my composure to remain intact. I would not turn. I needed her to speak the choice aloud, to own the decision, or it would be meaningless. The clock on the console flashed. 2:59:50. She was behind me now, so close I could feel the minute displacement of air as she stopped. The expensive perfume of her tailored suit, the scent of my obsession, washed over me. 1 minute and 45 seconds left, Selena. I forced the words out, trying to sound clinical, in control. It's 2:58:15. You should be in my office now, inserting the card. I deliberately used the time from a minute ago, letting her know I had been counting, waiting, and expecting her betrayal until the last possible second. She walked toward me, her footfalls deliberately heavy, breaking the controlled silence of my wait. She stopped just behind me. I felt the light, tentative pressure of her hand on my shoulder, a physical tether that nearly shattered my carefully constructed calm. I was there, she confessed, her voice low, husky, and thick with the weight of her surrender. I was in your office. I saw the panel. I saw the retinal scanner. I had the silver card in my hand. 2 hours, 59 minutes, 55 seconds, 5 seconds left. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to turn, to pull her onto my lap, to end the agony of the wait. But I held fast. The final truth had to be hers alone. And you decided that the risk of me hunting you down was too high. I surmised, my voice flat, challenging her one last time. No, she disagreed, the tremor in her voice sending a shockwave through my system. I decided that running from you was a greater form of betrayal than any betrayal I could inflict upon you. The freedom you offered me was a better prison than the freedom I knew. I can't go back to being unseen, Roman. I can't go back to being bored. The confession was better than any success, any power grab. It was the purest form of victory. 03000. The time of her escape window officially closed. The digital display on the wall did not flash red. It remained dark. The script had not been injected. The key was unused. The relief that crashed over me was so immense, so physical, that it nearly brought me to my knees. It wasn't the relief of avoiding failure. It was the pure, visceral joy of being chosen. I turned, the movement deliberate, finally shedding the facade of the dawn and allowing the man, the possessive, vulnerable, utterly triumphant man, to surface. Her eyes were wide, wet with unshed emotion, and blazing with the beautiful terror of commitment. You stubborn, magnificent ghost, I breathed, the words thick with the emotion I could no longer contain. Her hand was still on my shoulder. I captured her face in my hands, my thumbs caressing the fragile skin. The tension that had been a slow burn for days, fueled by shared intelligence and proximity, was now a full-blown inferno. "You are mine, Selena," I vowed, pulling her closer, my mouth descending on hers. The kiss was a collision of relief and raw need, a messy, consuming testament to the shared danger that now bound us. It was a sealing of the most important contract of my life. I tasted the rich, complex notes of the wine on her breath, and beneath it, the unmistakable metallic tang of shared adrenaline. I deepened the kiss, staking my claim, feeling the frantic, answering pulse of her commitment beneath my hands. The world outside the window, the entire city I controlled, ceased to exist. There was only the heat, the connection, and the devastating realization that the ghost had finally found the one thing she couldn't escape: home. When I finally broke the kiss, resting my forehead against hers, I was breathing heavily, my control utterly shattered. "The keycard," I murmured, running my hand through her dark hair, pushing the strands away from her face. "Where is it?" "On your desk," she whispered, her voice rough, her eyes still locked on mine. "Next to your inkwell." I didn't need it. I don't need the door open. I need the challenge you provide. I allowed myself a true, unguarded smile, a sight few men had ever witnessed. I knew you couldn't resist. "The ultimate challenge isn't beating the lock, Selena. It's trusting the man who left it open for you." I pulled her into my arms, cradling her against my chest, feeling the solid, perfect weight of her body against mine. "You've chosen the architect, Mia Cara," I murmured into her hair, a promise, a possession, and a profound admission of love. "Now, let's go show the city what happens when a ghost and a Don choose to stop stealing from each other and start stealing the entire world together. The ghost is no longer mine. We are ours, and the game has only just begun."
Chapter 11. Selena. The world didn't end at 3 a.m. The walls didn't crash down, the alarms didn't blare, and the network governor, the ultimate lock, remained untouched. Instead, the world sharpened, focused entirely into the precise space where Roman's hands were cupping my face, and the silence of the city outside was overwhelmed by the sound of my own, ragged breathing. The kiss that followed my confession was not a reward. It was an acknowledgement. It was consuming, demanding, and utterly without artifice. It wasn't the kiss of a jailer reclaiming his property, but the fierce, triumphant claim of a predator who had finally found his equal. Every moment of shared adrenaline, every piece of dry, aggressive banter, every flicker of sexual tension that had been building between us for weeks, culminated in that one perfect collision of need. I kissed him back with the desperate honesty of a woman who had finally run out of secrets. I gripped the silk lapels of his robe, pulling him closer, anchoring myself to the solid, warm core of the man who had willingly left his throat open for my betrayal. When he finally pulled back, he didn't move far. He simply shifted, wrapping his arms tightly around my waist, lifting me effortlessly and carrying me the few steps to the immense, silk-sheeted bed. He didn't speak. There was no need for words. The confession was made, the choice finalized. The tension that had defined our relationship broke, dissolving into something raw, passionate, and fiercely tender. For the next few hours, the world ceased to exist outside the confines of the master suite. There was no dawn, no ghost, no firewalls, and no escape routes. There were only two people, stripping away the professional armor and the emotional defenses that had encased them for years. With Roman, there was no need for stealth. His touch was commanding, his focus absolute, and his inherent possessiveness was less a threat and more a profound reassurance of permanence. He wasn't gentle, but he was patient, exploring the landscape of my body with the same intense, analytical focus he applied to a rival's network. And I discovered that the calculated stillness he maintained in the boardroom gave way to a powerful, unleashed energy in the dark. The experience was a dizzying blend of intellectual dominance and pure, physical submission, a perfect reflection of the chaos and control that defined our partnership. I woke hours later, just as the first cold streak of dawn painted the penthouse windows a pale, pearly gray. I was pressed against Roman's chest, my head tucked perfectly beneath his jaw, one of his heavily muscled arms draped possessively across my waist. He was already awake. I knew it by the slight tension in his breathing, the way his fingers, curled against my skin, were minutely flexing. He was no longer the man lost in passion. He was the architect, assessing the aftermath. "Good morning, Ghost," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep and satisfaction. "I am no longer the ghost," I corrected, the words tasting like a new truth. "The ghost is dead." She would have run. He shifted slightly, leaning down to press a soft, possessive kiss into my hair. "The ghost is not dead, Mia Cara. She simply traded up. You've traded the solitude of the shadow for the sovereignty of the throne. That is not death. That is evolution." I pushed myself up onto my elbow, looking down at him. Even disheveled, his dark hair falling across his forehead, he radiated a powerful, composed confidence. His eyes, dark, intelligent, and now alight with a warmth I hadn't expected, were focused entirely on me. "We need to talk about the contract," I stated, immediately injecting the conversation with the necessary friction. My body was relaxed, but my mind was not. Roman smiled, a slow, utterly devastating curve of his lips. "I had a feeling you wouldn't be content with the physical terms alone." "Never," I confirmed, pulling the silk sheet up to cover my chest. "The deal we struck was born of blackmail and necessity. This new dynamic, it was born of choice and addiction." "Addiction to the challenge, yes." "I am aware," he agreed, his fingers tracing the curve of my collarbone. "What are your terms, partner?" "First, my sister's safety remains absolute, without the contingency of my presence. If I am captured, harmed, or even betrayed by you, the account you set up for her remains untraceable and fully operational. Her safety is non-negotiable, even in the event of my failure or disappearance." Roman was silent for a long moment, the smile gone, replaced by the cool calculation of the dawn. He studied me, searching for the lie. "Accepted," he finally said, his voice firm. "The offshore account is decoupled from my personal network. If I fall, the foundation remains. She is safe, Selena. That was never a trap, it was a promise." "Second," I continued, pushing my advantage. "I am not your asset, Roman. I am your partner. My assignments will be high-level strategy, requiring my unique skill set. I am not an assassin, and I will not be tasked with anything that compromises Project Aurora." "You are my weapon in the dark, Selena, and you have just proved that you are the only one I trust to handle my most delicate operations," he stated. "I will never ask you to compromise your conscience. I do not deal in blood, I deal in information and influence. The title is irrelevant, but the power is not. You have carte blanche on the North Wing, the archive, and any piece of information you require to excel. You are my second in command in the shadows, and your authority is absolute. And third," I leaned closer, my voice dropping, the teasing returning, laced with the memory of the night. "The tension must remain. The day I cease to be challenged by your complexity, or the day you stop trying to anticipate my moves, is the day the partnership dissolves. I need you to be ruthless, Roman. I need you to be the architect." He laughed, a rare, deep sound that resonated in his chest. He pulled me over him, settling me firmly on his hips. The sudden, intimate pressure reignited the electrical current that constantly flowed between us. I can assure you, Carissima, that I will never stop anticipating your escape attempts. In fact, I insist you keep plotting them, he murmured, his hands possessively trailing up my back. Now I have a reward for you that supersedes all three of your demands, and it's located on my desk. I looked toward the desk, the same desk where I had placed the silver key card, the unused key to my freedom. My curiosity was too strong to resist. I slipped out of bed, crossing the vast room. The master suite was cold, but my skin was flushed with heat. I walked over to the desk, finding the card still there, lying next to his antique inkwell, face up. But next to the key card was a small, bespoke black leather box. I opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of midnight velvet, was a piece of jewelry that took my breath away. It wasn't diamonds or gold. It was a necklace crafted from heavy, polished titanium, the same titanium used in his vault. The central piece was a small, elegant lock, designed not to secure anything, but to be an artifact of engineering. It was simple, cold, and utterly beautiful. I picked it up. Engraved discreetly on the back, in a micro-sized font, were two sets of coordinates. The coordinates of the Metropolitan Building where we executed the Valerius heist, and the coordinates of the rise shaft where I nearly got stuck. A reminder of your first official success as my partner. Roman's voice came from behind me, low and possessive. I turned. He was standing in the doorway to the ensuite bathroom, now fully dressed in a crisp white shirt and slacks, looking every inch the composed Dawn. It's a magnificent piece of engineering, I admitted, running my thumb over the cold metal. But what is the true reward? He walked toward me, stopping inches away, his gaze holding mine, challenging and adoring all at once. He reached out and gently took the silver keycard from the desk. This was the key to your freedom, Selena. It is now redundant, he said. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he inserted the key into a discreet slot hidden on the side of the titanium pendant. It clicked, locking into place. The lock wasn't just decorative. It was functional. But the key now secured the necklace to itself. The true reward is this. It is a piece of my vault, permanently secured by the key to your old life, he explained, his voice thick with meaning. But there's a microprocessor inside the clasp. If you are ever truly in danger, if you are ever compromised, or if I am ever unable to protect you, this piece of titanium will automatically trigger a full system meltdown of the Costello network, scrubbing your entire existence and transferring control of Project Aurora to the Geneva facility. It is the ultimate fail-safe. It is the key to my destruction. Designed by me. For you. He placed the necklace around my neck, the cold titanium settling against my skin. His fingers lingered for a moment on the back of my neck, right at the juncture of my spine. A silent promise of both protection and ownership. You don't wear a crown, Mia Cara, Roman concluded, meeting my gaze with fierce intensity. You wear the lock. And only you hold the key to the ultimate destruction of my empire. That is the new contract. That is the only contract that matters. I reached up, my fingers closing around the cold titanium. The gift wasn't jewelry, it was shared power. It was the absolute, unburdened truth that my worth to him was measured in risk and control. Consider the terms accepted, Roman, I whispered, a slow, intoxicating grin spreading across my face. But be warned, I may just use the destruction clause to get better negotiating terms. I wouldn't have it any other way, Ghost, he retorted, his eyes alight with triumph and affection. He leaned in, giving me a final, possessive kiss. Now, the tailor is back at 0800, and we have a city to finish stealing.
Chapter 12. Roman, 3 months. 3 months since Selena walked away from freedom and into my arms. And in that time, The city had undergone a quiet, surgical renovation. Luciano, our primary rival, had been slowly bled dry, not of life, but of influence, through a series of brilliant, untraceable thefts and strategic data leaks orchestrated by my new partner. Our relationship was less a romance and more a constant, high-stakes tactical exercise. We didn't date. We executed joint operations. Our pillow talk was encrypted strategy, and the tension that once threatened to tear us apart now fueled us. A sizzling current of shared ambition and possessive love. We had achieved an equilibrium that defied all logic. A terrifyingly functional, high-passion partnership built on the unbreakable contract of shared danger. Tonight was the final act, the neutralization of Luciano. He was hosting a summit to sign a new, highly dangerous trade treaty with the South American cartel, a treaty that would triple his power base and destabilize the entire city. Luciano's fortress was the old Renaissance tower, heavily secured, paranoid, and arrogant. I was positioned 3 miles away in a state-of-the-art mobile command unit, disguised as a municipal maintenance truck, running communications and counter-surveillance. Selena was already inside. Architect to ghost. Confirm position and vitals, I murmured into the specialized long-range mic set. Selena's voice, crisp and utterly calm, was instantly in my ear. Ghost confirmed. Server room access achieved. Vitals are steady, Roman. My pulse is only racing because your mission briefing was too predictable. I smiled, a slow, appreciative curl of my lips. Predictability ensures survival, Carissima. Your task remains the same. Upload the Trojan script to the main treaty server, ensuring the data self-destructs precisely 22 seconds after Luciano signs the documents. Luciano's humiliation must be absolute, public, and instant. Your window is 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Understood. The difficulty, Roman, is in the aesthetics. Anyone can launch a Trojan. Only I can make it look like Luciano's own chief of security sabotaged the agreement because he was secretly working for the triads. I'm counting on you to be the artist of misdirection, I replied, my gaze fixed on the thermal mapping display. I could see her heat signature, a small, dark bloom of warmth, moving with impossible grace across the secure network floor. The titanium lock I had given her, the key to my destruction, was hidden beneath her silk shirt, a constant physical reminder of the stakes. I knew, with frightening certainty, that I would happily allow her to initiate that meltdown if it meant securing her safety. That was the essence of my surrender. My life, my empire, now rested entirely on her choice to stay. I have eyes on the target server. It's protected by a voice activation lock using Luciano's unique vocal cadence, she informed me. I anticipated that, I said, pulling up the countermeasure. We fed his last 3 hours of private phone calls into the speech engine. I'm transmitting the generated audio file now. It's a 2-second burst of his voice repeating the phrase, "Execute Protocol Alpha." Wait for the countdown. Received, she breathed. I assume I need to hit the server at the exact moment he's distracted by the South American delegates. No, I corrected, my voice dropping, the predatory thrill returning. You hit it when he's smiling. Luciano's arrogance is strongest when he believes he has won. That's your soft spot. Wait for the smile. A small, genuine laugh echoed in my ear. Oh, Roman. You understand me too well. That's why I can never leave. You keep finding the better target. The communication went silent for a tense minute. On the monitor, I watched her position herself near the server, blending into the shadows cast by the expensive networking hardware. Then, a faint, metallic hiss came through the mic, the sound of her accessing the audio port. "Luciano is raising a toast," I stated, my eyes fixed on the live infrared feed. "He's smiling, Roman." The smile of a fool who thinks he's unstoppable. Transmitting audio file in 3, 2, 1, execute. The transfer was successful. I confirmed the signal was planted, encrypted, and set to a delayed trigger. The mission was complete. "Ghost, mission successful. Extraction initiated. I'm rerouting the main fire exits to the northwest stairwell. Move." But instead of retreating, I heard her sharp, sudden intake of breath. "Roman, hold the extraction. I see a secondary objective," she hissed, her voice tight with focus. "Selena, no, stick to the plan. That room is about to be secured by his private guard detail." "It's not an object. It's a file," she argued, her voice dropping lower, fading into the noise. "Luciano has a hard drive, a bespoke military-grade memory core, open on his private console. It's not part of the treaty data. It's labeled Aurora Override." My blood ran cold. Aurora Override. It was a kill switch designed to instantly pinpoint and expose the location of Project Aurora and its entire staff. Luciano had found the flaw in my conscience and was waiting to exploit it. "Abort, Selena. That's a trap. If you touch that console, you'll trigger the internal seismic alarm. Luciano will know you're there." "Too late," she clipped out. And the next thing I heard was a faint, muffled thud, the sound of her taking out the lone technician in the room.
"Selena, I didn't think. I acted." The moment I saw the label, Aurora Override, the professional boundary vanished, replaced by the fierce, possessive loyalty I felt for Roman's hidden vulnerability. He had given me the key to his destruction, the titanium lock, and I would not allow a rival to steal it. I neutralized the tech with a single, precise pressure point strike, silencing his body before he could utter a sound. I scrambled across the floor to Luciano's private console. It was a custom interface. I had 20 seconds before the guard rotation made their pass. "Roman, listen to me. I need a 20-second decryption code to access the memory core's BIOS," I whispered, already plugging my own custom USB drive into the console's auxiliary port. "Selena, you're on the seismic alarm threshold." "If you lean on that console." "Give me the code," I demanded, my voice raw with adrenaline. "If this file goes live, Project Aurora is exposed. You gave me the key to your destruction. Now help me destroy the threat." The urgency in my voice must have shattered his control, because his voice came back, stripped of the Dawn's composure, filled with raw, possessive love. "The override, Ghost, is a reverse sequence of my sister's birth date combined with the current timestamp of the Swiss account. Input 4-8-9-1-2-1 and the last 4 digits of the current minute, GO!" I didn't question the logic. I slammed the 6 digits into the BIOS prompt, followed by 0587, the last 4 digits of the current minute, 23:05:87. Access granted. My USB drive immediately launched the counterscript. It wasn't just scrubbing the file, it was launching a digital bomb, a localized EMP that would permanently destroy the physical memory core, leaving behind no data and no trace of external access. 10 seconds. The console was vibrating. "Transfer complete." "Drive is corrupted." "Memory core going dark," I reported, yanking the USB drive free. I heard the guards approaching the door. "Ghost, you have 3 seconds. Get out now." Roman's command was absolute. I didn't run to the door. I ran to the massive window overlooking the alley, 100 feet below. I pulled a small compressed canister from my tailored suit, a gift from the Dawn. "Architect, I'm using the high-tensile zip line. Cover me." "You magnificent fool," he roared, a mix of pure terror and fierce pride. I slammed the canister against the glass. It shattered outwards, silent and instantaneous, creating a perfect circular breach. I clipped the titanium necklace, the lock that secured my life, to the zip line and launched myself into the cold night air, descending rapidly toward the alley below. The wind tore past my face, but the thrill was immense, exhilarating, and perfectly shared. 20 minutes later, I found him waiting for me in the dark, silent depths of the city's oldest shipyard, our designated rendezvous. He wasn't in the armored car. He was standing alone on the loading dock, dressed in his steel-gray suit, his arms crossed, the city lights reflecting in the intensity of his gaze. I landed lightly behind a stack of crates, quickly retracting the line. I was breathless, my hair flying, but my body humming with electric success.
"You disobeyed a direct order," Roman stated, his voice low, heavy with unreleased tension.
I secured the existence of Project Aurora. A secondary objective is always preferable when it protects the primary asset. I countered, stepping out of the shadows. He didn't move. He simply stared, absorbing the sight of the woman who had risked everything, not for freedom, but for his vulnerability.
"I was ready to burn the whole operation down to secure your extraction," he confessed, his voice rough. "You risked your life for the integrity of my ghost."
I walked toward him, closing the final distance. I reached up and pulled the titanium lock off the chain around my neck, holding the heavy piece of metal between us. "I am no longer the ghost, Roman. I am the architect's shield," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I choose this. I choose the chaos, I choose the risk, and I choose the only man who ever willingly gave me the key to his destruction. You are my home, Don Costello." He let out a sharp, ragged breath, the final, perfect surrender. He reached out, taking the titanium lock and the silver keycard I had placed in his hand. He then tossed them both, with absolute indifference, into the dark, churning water below.
"The locks are redundant," he said, pulling me into a fierce, possessive embrace. The kiss that followed a hungry, total victory. "The cage is gone. There is only the partnership."
We returned to the penthouse, the city quiet and defeated below us. Luciano's downfall was already public, his humiliation a trending topic. Selena was curled on the massive sofa in the master suite, reading an antique cryptography manual, draped in one of Roman's silk shirts. Roman was seated beside her, sipping Macallan, a serene, utterly fulfilled expression on his face. "We need a better system for reward," Selena commented, without looking up from the manual. "I saved your life and the Foundation tonight. I require something appropriate for a woman who just destroyed a military-grade memory core."
Roman reached out, his hand resting on her thigh beneath the silk, his touch proprietary and warm. "I have already prepared the reward, Carissima."
"Oh, a new wing for the archive? A first edition Gutenberg?"
"Better," he murmured, his gaze loving and possessive. "I have arranged for us to acquire a new territory in the West End, Luciano's former territory. We will need a new headquarters, one that is discreet, elegant, and designed entirely by you, and it will require its own bespoke security system, built from scratch."
Selena finally looked up, her dark eyes blazing with pure delight. "You're offering me the ultimate challenge, the chance to build the unpickable lock, knowing I'll be the only one who can bypass it."
"I'm offering you the city, Selena," he corrected, leaning in, their faces inches apart, the familiar sexual tension alight again. "We don't steal objects anymore. We steal power. And we do it together. I am the architect. You are the ghost. And we are unstoppable."
He kissed her, a slow, profound kiss that held the promise of forever. He was the dawn, and she was the queen, and their kingdom was built on the exhilarating contract of shared danger, endless challenge, and an unbreakable love. The ghost had stopped running. She had found her home, and together they finally had everything worth stealing.